real quick, just to preface this, I don't necessarily, I spoke about, VR Jam on the last episode. They reached out to me. They want to be on the show. And I mean, I think that, I get reached out to by a lot of different projects that want to come on the show to, tell a story or promote a project or, all sorts of different things. And I think that, I always try to remind myself with this show, something that I try to do is I want as best I can to just kind of reflect what's happening in the ecosystem, kind of like regurgitate what's happening in the community and less kind of like, spin narratives or different things like that. So I think, and I, not to paint it in a negative light, but there's different purposes for different shows. You know what I mean? It's like, there's so many shows in the crypto space that are, and so many X spaces and so many different outlets like that are for, promoting a project and all those different types of things. And they're great because oftentimes, those shows do a great job of vetting projects, and those shows are how I figure out like what to pay attention to, what's going on. But for my show, it's like, it's not something I'm especially good at, I don't think. And, with this show, I have more fun just kind of, riffing, and it's a live show. So it doesn't lend itself so much to like prepared stuff. But anyways, I have projects reach out to me all the time. And VR Jam reached out, and it's tough because, I hadn't really like clued into the project too much. I didn't know a ton about it. All I really saw, about VR Jam was, kind of like a little bit of a failed launch. And I don't say failed launch, like, I think that people talk often about like the tokenomics or the plan or the strategy or the whatever it is. To me, it's like, I don't necessarily like trying to launch an initiative and having it not work. I don't really deem that a failure. I mean, this is Web3. There's always like a high chance of something that you try to do just not working out. It is the way it is. We see it all the time, even from established projects that launch stuff that just goes sideways or something like that. Like we saw that with the Hashpack INO. It's like you have a little issue, people get upset, but what really matters to me is, what's the response, listening, moving through it, getting past it. I talk on the show a lot of times about, I usually judge projects when they're just not having a great time or when they fail, because it's an opportunity to see the character of a project. And I mean, the pathway to success is lined with failure. It's like, you got to just fail fast. And there's so many incredible projects in the ecosystem that have failed and moved through it and, gotten better. It's like, think about all the NFT projects that have just had mints that have just been infuriatingly bad and very high profile. And we're talking hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars of liquidity. And those projects are able to navigate those situations, keep a community under control, move through it. So, I think that that's something that's really important to take into account. And so for me, the whole VR Jam thing, again, like I didn't know a ton about the project. I don't want to talk about, whatever it may be, like the ins and outs and specifics of the tokenomics or how everything went down or whatever. It's more so about like, how does a project deal with, a failure? And then also too, really examining the hedera community, in the moment too, and kind of, being a little bit surprised at, some of the stuff that goes down, because the other side to it is like, we do want to have an ecosystem that's attractive to build in. So it's just one of those difficult, messy situations. And to be honest, I didn't really want to talk about it. I talked about it last week, but if you want to go in depth to it, listen to HBAR Bull's Spaces yesterday. He had the VR Jam guys up there. And I think that, to set the stage, what I'll do is I'm just going to play a quick clip from the Spaces and just kind of start there. And then I don't want to, hit on this for too long, but Let's just listen to a quick clip to just kind of set the tone and kind of see what can happen with a lack of experience in Web3.
This is what people are up in arms about. I don't actually comprehend why there is such vitriol and anger here from so many people. We're talking about such insignificant amounts of money. This is just very minor adjustment padding around the top and bottom price at the beginning, right at the very start. And then after that, just us putting little small amounts of our own money on the market to create an orderly trading environment and to do a little bit of price support. This is exactly what Web3 projects, high quality ones, all over the world do every day of the week. We're very transparent and open about what we do because we believe that's the best way to do business. And perhaps we should be a little bit more cloak and dagger about what we do here. And perhaps we shouldn't have been as open and honest with everybody as we were.
So that was kind of a little bit shocking to me because, you know, on the onset, it's like basically what I was watching was like, okay, here we go. You know, a project comes in, they're inexperienced. They don't really have, you know, well thought out strategy. They do a little thing. It's a failure, but it's like, what was it? It was like, you know, there's a liquidity pool of like 25K or something. It's like, it's really not that big of a deal. And there's all this kind of back and forth. And what I saw started to take place, that I've seen happen so many times in the startup space that that people should probably be familiar with is kind of like this Barbra Streisand effect, right? So the Barbra Streisand effect describes how attempting to hide or censor information can inadvertently cause it to gain more public attention, right? So this originated from a 2003 incident where Streisand sued to remove photos of her home, but the lawsuit increased interest and spread of the images. So it was weird to me when I was like, oh, it's this, misstep from a project, whatever it is. And just kind of in that clip there, you know, the representative of the project saying that, you know, an alternative would be being less transparent or cloak and dagger or whatever. And that's kind of weird to say on a public forum. And I think that's kind of what that Barbra Streisand effect is it's like, I saw that they had, you know, shut down their Discord and disabled comments and these types of things. And I mean, again, you know, their situation, I think, is they're super stressed and overwhelmed. But that's kind of what can happen is if you start to really spin things down, it just creates this situation where stuff just gets, you know, a little bit wild. And for me, I think that a project's community definitely reflects the temperament of the founders. And so I think that under stress and pressure, it's definitely a little bit surprising to hear that over something like really not that big of a deal. So again, go check out that Spaces. I think it was, there's some good info shared as well. I got a better understanding of the project, but I think that to me, it was just a signal of like something's not quite right. And for me, I think that it definitely is an outlier, right? I think that, you know, the way that VR Jam is handling stuff is definitely kind of just very different. We've seen a few projects do stuff like this, but this is like, you know, definitely an outlier and one to just kind of, it's kind of like a case study in a little bit of a way. So for me, you know, I think that this is really just a lack of experience, putting profit before customers, not really having a clear value proposition, and just a lack of planning, right? And, you know, I think that, to be honest, many of us are guilty of that in our past, in work, maybe early projects we've had. It comes with the territory, and you kind of have to, you know, take your lumps with it. But I think that in this case, there was just, it felt like there was just an element of like maybe some outside investors or whatever it might be. Maybe it's a little over leveraged, but whatever the case is, I think that, you know, and people say this in the space a lot, but I think it is, you know, it would be a good idea to zoom out a little bit. You know what I mean? I think that really what we're talking about is a pretty small failure from a really kind of tiny project. And for some reason it's kind of feeling outsized. And I think that stuff like this, I think that in this case, it's best to just fade into the background and go back to the drawing board and, not, necessarily kind of keep forcing, a project like this into the limelight. I think that there's definitely work they got to do. And, I just like, because of the spaces, hearing kind of what was going down and kind of thinking of it after the fact. I just saw this, like I said, as kind of like a little bit of a case study, a little bit of a learning opportunity for myself. And then maybe kind of passing some of that on. So I think that when it comes to like the VR jam area or side of things, and it kind of speaking to VR jam, it's kind of like, it really, time to go back to the drawing board. And it's, things definitely feel a little bit over leveraged. And we say this to, projects really need to understand that it's important to know the market, right? Especially if you're going to be, looking for funding or support directly from the market, and knowing that like, hedera is a, relatively small market. You know what I mean? There isn't a ton of value to extract. So sometimes with projects, if their only hope or if their only avenue is to, do a mint or a drop or a token airdrop or ICO or whatever it may be for this small community, I think that you really have, and I think in the spaces, the HBAR bull hit this really well, is it's so important to spend that time, that 6 months to a year even, of embedding in the community, getting to know people, investing in other projects, those different types of things. And that's the winning strategy that we've seen so many projects do. Now, I think that for me, again, just looking at this kind of like a case study, it is really kind of clear, the manipulative nature of it. When I saw that kind of, again, we'll call it, a failed token launch or whatever. I think what really set people off is like that tweet that came out where they were like, this was an ultra successful token launch. It's like, well, no, it's not. And I think that's where you lost a lot of people. Because again, failure is an opportunity to, really kind of move forward and galvanize your community, and fix the strategy or go back to the drawing board or whatever. And that's how many projects build trust. Again, so many projects have had really bad mints or really bad launches. And it's like, if you can move on from that stuff, that is real strength. And I think the alternative of, attempting to gaslight people is just not helpful. So I think that, again, looking at this as a use case, the lesson there is kind of like, if you mess up, own it, right? Don't mess up and then say, it was super successful. It just wasn't. And I mean, if it was successful in the numbers, sure, like that's one thing. But if the market is telling you it wasn't a success, then it wasn't a success, And I think that even though sometimes it feels like it was a success, you kind of have to find that reality. And I think that's one thing that's like so hard to do. Now, I think that, and I see Grelf requesting to speak. Grelf, I'll have you up in a minute. The other thing too is like, I think that the strategy is just not good. And there's it's like feeding the trolls. It's like, I think that I've seen this with a few projects, especially coming into Web3 that are fresh. It's like, it is a different environment. Even, I shouldn't even just say Web3. I see this in like the AI startup space too. It's like this old age, core tenet of the internet of like, don't feed the trolls. Cause some people are just trolls, and we've talked about this before on so many different spaces. And then I think that one other thing to keep in mind is, an enterprise being uncomfortable in Web3 is not the same as being bullied, right? Those are two different things. And I think that in this case, it was, I think it went past that point. But I think that, there's sometimes that those are conflated in a little way. And it's like, I think that, again, an enterprise or organization, if they don't put that time into understanding the market, of course, when they do a launch, they're going to feel out of place. And so I think that that's, again, our big lesson there is like, it's so important to spend that time and really kind of be in it. because you do have to, you have to toughen up. You have to know the market. You have to have a plan. You can't let things get out of control if things mess up. If you do mess up or you stumble, you are going to have, that's when you are going to start to get toxic people and bullies and stuff. And I think it's important to not let it get to that point. And again, there's so many projects that do a great job of being able to ride that line. And then, I think that it's just not good to close yourself off, and just not good to put that message out there of wanting to not be transparent or stuff like that. I think that, actions and intentions gotta be for transparency. I think that's really important. So that's VR Jam. And again, peace and love, respect, looking at this as a case study. I think that, it's important to just kind of, understand kind of what went down. And again, not so much about the actual ins and outs of it or mechanics of it. It's more the optics aspect of it, the marketing aspects of it, the community aspect of it, the communication aspect of it. That is so important. Now, again, the other side to this is the HBAR community and the hedera community. And I think that on one hand, I think people are too quick to label criticism or frustration or anger as bullying. I mean, I think that, as a new ecosystem and Web3 kind of still being a bit new, I think across the board, trolls and degens and shit posters and all that kind of stuff, they do play a role in the ecosystem. It's like a little filter. It's not great, but it's a market. This is stuff trying to come to maturity. And that will happen. And I think as it does, folks like that won't play such a big role, but I think that's the nuanced stuff that's really difficult. But I think that what's not nuanced is I think that some of you in the hedera community are legitimately insane. Like, to be honest, there's a few people, these are the truly toxic people. And I think, when a project turns to shit, like annoying flies, you buzz over to pick apart the remains and yell and scream on X. It's like kind of like arriving as things are falling apart. And I think that, somehow seeing a project fail brings joy. And I think that that's where we, I think there's like a line between like goofing on somebody. But I do think that there's a line that gets crossed. And I think we saw that in this instance. And I think that really enjoying seeing projects fail and glomming on like that and really kind of just beating a dead horse, it's just nuts. And I think that folks like that, you represent the worst in Web3 and you represent the worst of the hedera community. And I think you're the ultimate barrier to mass adoption, because let's zoom out even more. Sure, VR Jam messed up. Sure, I think that the founding team is, unhinged in a lot of ways. But we zoom out, what do you see, right? You see a project with, as they say, some major clients and this and that. And you just see what's on the surface and it's just a nightmare. How does that make hedera an attractive place to build, right? It's a barrier, right? And again, these people, and who you are, you create this stench of this loser energy in this ecosystem that other people smell. And that's what I see. I see posts on Twitter from people outside of hedera, and it's like, oh, more drama in hedera, oh, more this and that. And it's like this tiny group of people. It's repulsive, right? You're a small group. You keep getting smaller. I hope you sell your bags and leave. That's all I have to say about that. It's just nuts. I think that, I'll shit on VR Jam all day, but as bad as VR Jam, they do not deserve that at all. Nobody does. And again, talking about a very few people, and it's not just VR Jam, it's every single thing these folks show up, and it just grinds my goddamn gears. And also too, overall, I think we need higher quality projects that attract higher quality people. But that means we've got to be a community deserving of high quality projects. And again, from the outside, it just does not appear this way. hedera does just not appear as a high quality community. It's just unfortunate because again, it's this group of people. And again, I don't want to identify anybody, and I don't know who all these people are. I just get this sense, and I'm hearing from people of just these, folks going nuts. And also too, please, show some respect to the HBAR Bowl. I mean, this guy has been tirelessly dedicated to the community for years. People say stuff like, he works for the HBAR Foundation, there's a conflict of interest and blah, blah, blah. It's like, you know what? Guy needs to pay his bills. I have huge respect for anybody who's made the sacrifices needed to stay full-time in this ecosystem, especially through a bear market. That's the best possible outcome we can have is folks like the HBAR Bowl, Brandon, being in this ecosystem, being active full-time. It's a huge asset. And it's just, again, it's just infuriating to me to kind of see people, dumping on him that way. It's just nuts. And I mean, people like the HBAR Bowl, they're the best of this community. That's why people want to build here. And I disagree with the HBAR Bowl on VR Jam. I don't think that, he should have done that Spaces, but I agree with him on 90% of stuff. He's a legend. You have to respect that. So we have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. We have to be able to disagree with people and, have debates or whatever. But understand that, there are lines, and when you cross them, it just creates so many problems. It turns, again, something that is just a tiny little failure into this massive overblown thing. And I think that it's just tough. So again, zooming out, everybody in this ecosystem believes in the network. They hold HBAR, right? That should be bigger than any drama of the day, right? That's the way I see someone on X, and I'm, getting into it with them. I see Tom listening down there. Tom, sometimes I'll get into it with him on X and be back and forth with stuff or whatever. I can scroll through the list of folks listening live. I've probably gotten in, arguments with most of you, but it doesn't matter because it's like, I'm talking to someone who also believes the same things I do. We're both building on Hedera. It's just energy. So it's like, what can we do to stop it from getting to that point? And I think that, wrapping up, it's like, we just have to stop highlighting these projects. They don't have a clear value proposition. And especially if they're soliciting investment from the community, it's like, why is it so important? Why, VR Jam themselves say it's so tiny and insignificant and stuff. It's like, they're a tiny, insignificant project, and they just don't have the gas right now to do what they got to do. And, I think that it's like, just go back to the drawing board and then do some cool stuff. Projects, it happens to projects all the time. So it's up to them to sort it out. But I think it's like, let's zoom out here a little bit and kind of go like, this is a situation in the ecosystem. This isn't the whole ecosystem. And yeah, I think that goes kind of to the theme of the show. We've got to think bigger, right? We have to think bigger than all this kind of stuff. I'm going to invite I don't know quite how this is going to go, but I'm inviting Grolf up to the stage here. I don't know exactly who I'm getting. If Grolf is on the phone, I hope that your connection is good from the stump. How's it going, Grolf?